After seeing a painting by Yannick Dubois, which captures some giant energy, I felt to ask him about his experiences with giants as we took a walk along a river in Dartington in Devon. Yannick is an artist and illustrator who has studied Druidry, and through his project Forest Art, he intends to create nature-inspired artwork, teaching materials, and empowering workshops which bring humans and nature closer together.
Dream I had about giant. So in my dream I was in a forest, and in front of me in this clearing there was a group of deer that came out of the forest, and a stag with golden antlers was leading the deer, and I looked at them and felt a sense of awe and magic. And suddenly behind me this big noise happened, and a giant appeared from within the woodlands, and he was just like wild, and the deer ran away and the giant started coming towards me, and he had a big rock and he tied a rope around it, and he would throw the rock towards me and then pull it back towards him. So eventually I climbed up onto a tree, and the giant was breaking off branches and was trying to get to me. And this illustrates how I perceive giants in general. So if you imagine you are living in nature as a farmer a few thousand years ago, and you had your fields and the seasons and your farm and your animals, you'd probably be making offerings to the deities of fertility of the soil, the deities of the sun and the moon, the water. And then there are these other forces that are seen as more chaotic and that interfere sometimes with what we are doing as humans. So these forces can be strong winds, there could be an avalanche, there could be rocks rolling down a hill, there could be big waves on the oceans. Whenever the forces of nature get really chaotic and dangerous to us, people like to imagine those as giants, like uncontrollable wild forces of nature that are difficult to relate to, because they might not care about us, they might not care about the order that we're trying to create and the lives that we're trying to live. And that's reflected in the Norse mythology, where the god Thor is asked to protect the people from the forces from the giants, and he has a big hammer and he goes out and flies into the sky where he fights giants, and that's when you have thunderstorms. So there's these two aspects of nature and of deity, or what we experience as life-giving and life-destroying. And I think the gods and the giants are like a mythological framework to understand these forces. Some years ago I was on a walk in the forest in Belgium, in my hometown, and I saw like a row of trees that had come down with the wind. And later on when I came back home I started drawing, and I imagined this giant who is walking around in the forest, and he just pushes these trees over and then they fall down. And I really like that idea of forces in nature that are bigger than us, that evoke a sense of respect and maybe even fear of the chaotic energy. And in the drawing I made, the giant looks quite gentle. So the idea I have about giants is that most of the time these forces of nature are actually very relaxed and peaceful, and they're just kind of moving around in the landscape, in the wind, in the water. And then occasionally they get wild and they start playing or moving in ways that are potentially damaging to a place. A bit like a human walking across the forest and stepping onto ants on the ground, onto insects. I think the giants or the forces that are represented as giants maybe relate to us in the same way. They just want to be wild, they just want to express themselves. But they're not necessarily considering us and what we as humans are building and creating on this planet.
Perhaps one of the most famous giants in the UK is the Cerne Abbas giant, a huge hill figure cut out of the chalk in Dorset. Its date of origin is unknown, and it is thought by some to date to the 17th century and may have been created as a political satire, although there is lots of folklore regarding the site, including the story that it is based on the outline of a real giant. The Long Man of Wilmington is a giant hill figure in East Sussex, also carved to reveal the underlying chalk. This giant held 2 staves, and its historical origins are unknown. Originally it was thought to be from the Iron Age, yet more recent investigations have suggested that it could have been created in the 16th or 17th century. An important tool for a layperson would have been the sighting staff. In his book, The Old Street Track, Alfred Watkins wrote a chapter on the sighting staff. Lay people would have used 2 staves to mark out points along a ley line, and this system, he believed, was conducted over thousands of years, dying out before the period of written record and in a state of decay when the Romans invaded in the 1st century. He also wrote about the significance of the staff as an emblem of authority. Druids had long staffs and yew rods. The bishops had a pastoral staff. Sighting staves were used by lay people. Rods were used for dowsing, and the wand was symbolically associated with the magician. The link that Alfred Watkins made between the giant at Wilmington holding 2 staves and the staves used by surveyors of ley lines is intriguing. A giant, due to its height, would have a far-seeing perspective over the land and would therefore perceive the landscape in a different way. Giants are often seen as the builders of the remains of previous civilizations in European folklore, for example the huge basalt columns of the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland. I loved how storyteller and mythologist Martin Shaw, in his book Scatterlings, described his sadness at the defeat of the giants by the conqueror Brutus of Troy. The giants had abided in Britain for centuries, and he felt they represented an interior energy of the land, or powerful energies within the psyche, rather than being the original people of the land. Giant energy, he believed, is evoked whenever we follow a vision quest, which is rarely without its perils, and this energy can become hostile if it is not aligned to a greater purpose. Giants could represent the highly charged dynamics of the subconscious mind. Our brains can go through periods of necessary disorganization and organization whilst healing trauma, and at times this process can feel very chaotic. We might also see the reverse of this in people who have suppressed their life forces and then vent out with passive aggressiveness, such as troll behaviour on the internet. They might post inflammatory remarks or start quarrels just to upset people. When we get in touch with our subconscious mind, we have the chance to give our inner troll some focus and drive, so that it can be a protector rather than a sabotaging force. In Norse mythology, trolls were often described as protectors of nature. Trolls often dwelled in isolated caves, mountains and rocks, and could be guardians of places. In the Edda, an old Norse work from the 13th century, a female troll was described as being the guardian of a grave and a companion of the seeress. It is thought that ley lines pass through the town of Totnes in Devon, where the Brutus stone can be found on 4th Street. According to local legends, it is thought that Brutus of Troy, the mythical founder of Britain, first stepped foot from his ship on a rock which is called the Brutus stone. His legendary story is written in Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain. In this story, magicians predicted many things for the unborn Brutus, including the killing of his own parents, and as a boy, Brutus accidentally killed his father with an arrow, and his mother died in childbirth. Yet despite these tragedies, Brutus went on to achieve great things. He performed sacred rites at an abandoned temple of Diana, and received a vision about an island in the western oceans of giants where he was destined to settle. He accepted the quest and ventured towards the land of Britain, which was then known as Albion. After arriving, he conquered the giants who lived there, and the last giant, Gog-Magog, or Gog-Magog, was defeated by the warrior Cerne. In this wrestling match, the giant was thrown over the cliffs to his death, and the place was since after known as Gog-Magog's Leap, and the exact location is not known. Yet until the 17th century, figures of the giant and Cerne have been cut into the turf at Plymouth Hoe, revealing the limestone beneath. Cerne was rewarded with land, which he named Corinia, eventually becoming known as Cornwall. In folklore, it is written that the giant's blood drenched the stones and turned the sea red, and there are many red stones to be found along the coast of the Riviera. According to these legends, Brutus went on to establish a city on the River Thames known as Troja Nova, or New Troy, which eventually became known as London. In the London Mayor's processions, effigies of the giants of this myth are still carried today, following a tradition that has been running for over 1,000 years. In the story of Brutus, the giant Gog-Magog is connected to Gog and Magog in the Bible, and the two great oak trees, Gog and Magog in Glastonbury near Glastonbury Tor, are revered by the local community and pilgrims to the area, and the trees are associated with ancient Druid practices at the site. In Michael Drayton's 17th century poem, Polly Albion, he described the giant Gog-Magog as being an oak tree who battled against Corin using rocks and trees which he pulled from the earth, since he did not have knowledge of weaponry. In Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain, he also contained other references to stones and giants. In one chapter, King Aurelius asked for Merlin's advice to build an everlasting monument for the dead who had been lost at battle, and Merlin told him to call for the giants' dance, a structure of stones in Killarhouse in Ireland, which were, according to Merlin, mystical stones with medicinal value. Merlin said, "The giants of old brought them from the farthest coast of Africa and placed them in Ireland while they inhabited that country. Their design in this was to make baths in them when they should be taken with any illness, for their method was to wash the stones and put their sick into the water, which infallibly cured them. With the like success they cured wounds also, adding only the application of some herbs. There is not a stone there which has not some healing virtue." Uther Pendragon, who was the brother of Aurelius and the father of the legendary Arthur, was sent to Ireland with an army, and using their strength and Merlin's magical arts, the stones were uprooted and transported to Britain. The stones referred to are thought to be Stonehenge. There are also many significant stones scattered across the UK associated with giants. There is a legend associated with Arthur and the highest mountain in Wales, known as Snowdon. It was believed that after Arthur's defeat of the giant Rita Gael, who had created a cape for himself out of the beards of his enemies, a cairn was built over the giant's body, and these piles of rocks can be seen at the summit. There is a folk tale of Jack the Giant Killer, who killed some bad knights during the reign of King Arthur, who was also recorded in various tales for his battles with giants. In Wales there is a menhir or standing stone known as the giant's shoe, and nearby is the giant's staff, which is another solitary standing stone and linked to a legend of the nearby Poet Stone, a burial chamber on a prehistoric track. It is thought that a giant threw the stone at his dog, who was dozing in the chamber. Interestingly, the monolith is also known as Arthur's Spear. In folklore, we often hear tales about rocks being thrown by giants. In his book about ley lines, The Old Straight Track, Alfred Watkins provided one example of a stone at the 6 crossroads of Teddington Cross, called the Tipple Stone, and was told by an old man at the nearby inn that a giant who had lived there had gone up to the hill to pick up a large rock to destroy his enemy's home. As he carried it down, he slipped, and his heel made a furrow in the hillside. Dropping the stone, it landed at the site of the crossroads, and it is said that the stone still has the holes where the giant's fingers had touched it. There are also many stories about giants or trolls in particular being turned to stone, and a famous example includes the trolls of Tolkien's The Hobbit. After quarrelling about how to cook the dwarves and hobbit they had captured, they were distracted by Gandalf, and instead of hiding from the sun, they were turned to stone in the dawnlight. In Scandinavian folklore, some landmarks are thought to have once been trolls transformed into stone. We see this process of transformation happen in nature all the time. After an animal or plant dies, in the right conditions, the bones can become fossilized and live on as rocks. The oldest fossils on Earth are thought to be around 4 billion years old. Zircon minerals discovered in the hills of Western Australia are thought to be the oldest terrestrial rocks on Earth, over 4 billion years old. Archaeologists have even spent time searching for fossils to gain evidence of a race of giants, and in 1890 3 large human bones were discovered, which were estimated to have been belonging to a human measuring 11 feet 6 inches tall, known as the Giant of Castelnau. I have found the realm of giants, and stones in particular, to be deeply intriguing. Some stones and giants can aid me in my meditations, and I love collecting with large stones out in nature and at sacred sites when I feel the invitation and have a good state of mind to work with their frequencies. I hope you enjoyed these stories of Totnes and the giants. Thank you for watching.